So it's taken me a while to actually get to this video. Um, I saw the Super Mario Bros. Movie on the 8th, and it has now been 10 days since then. Actually, it's a little bit into the 19th, so 11 days since then. And I did try to record something a bit earlier, not too much longer after I had seen the movie. But the thing is, I made like a little bullet point list, but I didn't really get all my thoughts out, and I also tried to do it in one go, so things were kind of weird, and I didn't quite say everything I wanted to get to. So what I've done now is I've sort of created a bit of a longer bullet point list, and instead of doing all things in one go, I am going to try and like get to each topic, think about, you know, how I want to word everything, how I want to say it, and then go. So it's still going to be, it's not going to be a scripted video. It's still going to be kind of a ramble, like you can probably already tell. But I think I'll be able to better say everything I want to say about the movie. And I also want to say there won't be spoilers in this, any explicit spoilers. There will be a section later where I sort of vaguely talk about spoilers. Like, I'll give you an example. I will not say, here's how Mario defeats Bowser. I won't say Mario defeats Bowser by blank. But I will say, like, here's how I felt about how Mario defeats Bowser. I'll, like, use the specific words, how Mario defeats Bowser, right? So, I'll be like, you know, sort of hinting at some spoilers like that, but I won't explicitly say anything, about, other than, like, the major plot points, of course. But yeah, if you're, mainly wondering if you just want the TLDW, didn't watch, of this video, I went with a group of 3 friends, and as soon as the credits started rolling, the first thing any of them said was, "That was a delight." And shortly after they said, "I don't think there was a moment during the movie that I was not smiling." And that is pretty much exactly how I feel. I have a few like nitpicks and stuff. None of my really complaints with the movie go beyond like nitpicky, like, oh, this could have been better. I mean, if you look at it as a film, is it, you know, this artistic masterpiece? Is it going to make you cry? Is it going to, you know, make you question things about humanity and morality? Absolutely not. This movie is not trying to be anything more than fun. I don't know why anyone would go into this expecting it to be anything more than fun. But as an on-screen interpretation of Mario, adaptation of Mario, this is everything I wanted it to be. Just about. I suppose there could have been more, but I think I'll sort of get to that in like the vague spoilers section. I also want to sort of talk about the canonicity of this movie, because Mario is a weird series where it has canon and it doesn't. It doesn't have like a canon timeline or anything. It's unclear, like, do all the kart games and everything where Bowser is like just rivals with Mario instead of enemies, do those all take place after the timeline, or are those like taking place as the games are coming out and like Bowser just makes a truce to not hurt anyone or kill anyone during those games? It's really weird. But Mario does have some canon elements, and this movie is not trying to replace canon, I would say. It's not trying to be the canon beginning of the Mario Bros. Journey. For example, Cranky Kong. The first Mario game is actually the Donkey Kong arcade game, and Donkey Kong in that game eventually grows older and becomes Cranky Kong. And then Cranky Kong has Donkey Kong Jr., and I actually forgot about this. I thought Donkey Kong Jr. grew up to be Donkey Kong, but no, Donkey Kong Jr. is the current Donkey Kong's dad. And so Cranky Kong is Donkey Kong's grandfather. In this movie, he's just straight up Donkey Kong's son. And also, he doesn't react to Mario as if he knows him at all. So obviously the like whole Donkey Kong thing didn't happen in this movie. So it's not canon to the games. But that being said, there are some aspects of the movie that I actually think could be canon that I wouldn't mind becoming canon, that I wouldn't mind if they said this is canon. For example, pretty much everything in Brooklyn leading up until they do enter the Mushroom Kingdom, all of that stuff, if you wanted to say that that is how they got to the Mushroom Kingdom for the first time, I would not complain whatsoever. I would happily accept this as, I would happily accept like the first, 15 or so minutes of this film as complete canon, nothing to report there. Peach has a backstory in this. That's another thing that I think it kind of does conflict with the games, because there's a Yoshi game where we see her as a baby in the Mushroom Kingdom, but they could argue that that happened like shortly after she arrived, I think, because I don't think in that game they're like being carried from the story scene. I think that was like the first Yoshi game only. I might be wrong about that, but anyway, in this story she has a different backstory that she doesn't come from the Mushroom Kingdom. But I would totally accept that as canon as well, because it is there's sort of been this weirdness with like, Mario and Luigi and Peach and, princesses being humans, and some of them we know come from different worlds, but then like, it's like Peach, she's supposedly always been part of the Mushroom Kingdom, but she's not a toad. She's just like a human like Mario and Luigi. And Mario and Luigi came from Brooklyn, but Peach didn't, so if they wanted to say she came from another world, I am perfectly happy to accept that as canon. Another aspect of this film I would like to talk about before I'm gonna go like over each and every character individually. That's the main thing I want to focus on. But another aspect I want to get to before we do that is one thing I thought would not be in this film that is in most Illumination movies is licensed music. And we didn't escape that fate. It is in the movie, but I will say it's not as bad as I was expecting, because they chose songs from like the 80s, from when Mario was first out. They chose, there's not an explicit song here that as a song I disliked. One in particular, I would say, okay, two of them took me out of the movie a little bit. The first one, simply because the first one, and I didn't think there was going to be licensed music. And the second one is just, there's a scene like when they first get to the Donkey Kongs, to the Jungle Kingdom, and it just plays Take On Me for some reason, and it doesn't really match with the scene at all. The rest of the songs, at least, they match with what's going on to an extent. But yeah, that one was just kind of weird and out of it. But it's not like any of them ruined the movie for me or anything like that. But yeah, I will say they didn't like. There's no California Girls in this movie. They didn't play like whatever rapper was popular 2 years ago. Anything weird like that. No, they went with music that, it's still licensed music. It still didn't need to be in the Mario movie, but It isn't like the music itself is bad and just totally takes you out of the experience. It's just, it's there. And yeah, I think now I'm just gonna go over every character, and I'll say, which feel like interpretations, which feel like they were pulled straight from the games. Yeah, we'll just go over them as I go. So first off, the most important character, the character that we were all the most worried about going into this, Foreman Spike. He's, of course, a very prominent character in the Mario canon. He has stuck with it through it all. He's still very important to the modern day games. He's in all of them. He has a very distinctive personality. He's not someone that you can just kind of interpret, because, he really is the most fleshed out character in all of Mario lore. It's just vital that they get Spike right. And, what did I think of his movie version? Whatever, dude. It's Spike. It's Foreman Spike from Wrecking Crew. Nobody cares. Okay, I think they did. I mean, he's fine. I will say, this is not a complaint against this movie. This is a complaint against Foreman Spike, like, personally. Like, if he was a real person, I would be mad at him for this, okay? This dude, at the beginning of the movie, he has like a verbal spat with Mario, and afterwards he angrily stomps off, right? This happens in a pizzeria, a New York pizzeria. And he had like an entire pizza pie. He just throws cash on the table and walks off from it. He had like one or two slices. He leaves this entire like homemade New York, handmade pizza pie on the counter just to rot. He just leaves it there. Like, you can, dude, go up to the counter, grab a box, and then like dramatically close the box in front of Mario to show you're mad. You don't have to just leave right away. You can still like storm off, and without having to give up your pizza. Like, I mean, it show, in terms of the movie, it's great writing. Of course, it shows that he's like, he's rich and he's sort of full of himself. But like, dude, don't just leave a whole pizza there. Alright, seriously, moving on to characters that are actually important to the Mario canon. Toad. So, first of all, let me say Keegan-Michael Key is doing a voice here. He's not just doing his own voice. He's pitching his voice up. I don't think they actually pitched his... Maybe they did pitch his voice up in post as well, but it kind of sounds like he's just doing a high voice himself. And it works for Toad. The thing about Toad isn't like an individual character, it's a species. So making an individual character Toad, they can kind of just do whatever they want. They can make any interpretation of it that they want. And it kind of can't suck because they can just say, well, that's just this Toad. They can replace him with an entirely different Toad if they had messed it up, but they didn't. The thing that sets this Toad apart is he is the brave one. Most Toads are... they're pretty cowardly. They run from Bowser at the merely hearing his name. They treat his name like Voldemort, I think, even. But this Toad is brave. They could easily set him up to be Captain Toad or something if they wanted to. And yeah, he's nice. The reason I'm covering him first is I kind of want to go over like kind of minor characters first. And he doesn't really have a lot to do. He's just sort of there. Sort of the comedic sidekick, but he doesn't play a big role in the story at all. He's just sort of alongside Mario for the ride, because we expect to see Toad, of course. But yeah, I mean, he has a few scenes that are funny. Yeah, he's an enjoyable character, but nothing like... He's not gonna be on screen too much. Alright, next is Cranky Kong. And Cranky Kong, in terms of his writing... At least he feels like he is pulled straight from the games. He does not feel like an interpretation necessarily. He just feels like this is Cranky Kong from the games. In the games, he is very egotistical. He's a crotchety old man. He is very sarcastic. He will break the fourth wall to criticize Donkey Kong and tell him that like he beat Donkey Kong Country in under an hour. That he's just he's like a boomer who is so sure of himself that he had it harder than the modern day kids, and he's better than the modern day kids. And that is pretty much exactly who they wrote here. Like with Donkey Kong, he will criticize Donkey Kong to his face, but then like he also hypes him up to everyone else and talks about how strong he is, and throughout his fight with Mario, that is in the trailers, as he's fighting Mario, he's of course like making sarcastic comments to Peach about Mario's mess ups and Donkey Kong's triumphs. The thing is, his performance does not sell it. I will spoil you right here. This is the one voice in the movie I was not super fond of, and I feel like Fred Armisen absolutely can do an old man like this. I feel like Fred Armisen actually was cut out for this job, so I don't know if it was the directing or what, or he just didn't really have a good idea of who Cranky Kong was. But yeah, that's the one thing. It's like the writing on paper is great, and they just like they really didn't sell it through how he delivered those lines. It's a bit disappointing. Yeah. Now, as for Donkey Kong, I would say this is a more of an interpretation, because Donkey Kong barely has any personality in his games. The most personality he has really is in Smash, so they really had to expand his character in this, had to give him more, you know, make him more of a person. And Seth Rogen is not doing a voice for this. Seth Rogen is just speaking in his Seth Rogen voice, but it certainly works for Donkey Kong. This voice coming out of Donkey Kong's body doesn't feel odd to me. And as a character, he is super immature. He's very, at least he acts full of himself in front of a crowd. And I think that was great. They sort of hinted like Cranky's facetiousness, his expectations for Donkey Kong are super high, and that kind of weighs down on Donkey Kong. And yeah, I think that works. I think that makes for a good dynamic for possibly even a Donkey Kong movie. When I went into this, I didn't really think a DK movie was that interesting to me, but now I'd be down for it after seeing this movie. And the biggest thing I like with Donkey Kong is just his dynamic with Mario. You can sort of sense this unspoken respect from them, but this very much present, very much spoken rivalry. They're constantly bickering with each other, but deep down, I think you can tell they don't hate each other like they kind of pretend to. But, you know, DK is immature and Mario is stubborn, which I'll get to later. And so they just sort of clash, and they actually they were very fun to watch on screen together. I think this is exactly what Mario and DK's dynamic should be with each other, is a rivalry where they're not explicitly enemies, but they don't necessarily treat each other like best friends or anything. Okay, now we're moving into more main characters, and we're going to start with Mario himself. If you have seen my reactions, you know that I, like many others, was very much not fond of the voice I heard. I was kind of thinking going into this movie that Chris Pratt's voice work would be my one real sticking point, like the one thing that really got on my nerves. The second that the camera panned back and showed Punch-Out characters on the wall, those fears completely dissipated. He's obviously not doing Charles Martinet's classic voice at all, but I feel like the ads just didn't really show off his Brooklyn accent. You can like barely hear it in like one of his lines, but yeah, he is doing a Brooklyn accent for the entire movie. It isn't just Chris Pratt's voice. He is doing a voice, and it works. Basically immediately I accepted this as a voice for Mario. Of course, the very I suppose Mario traditionalist part of my personality says, well, Charles Martinet is the definitive Mario voice. You know, this is a different Mario voice. Yeah, but like this is a Mario voice that works for Mario, for this version of Mario. But I was also worried about his personality, because Mario in the games is very bubbly, you know, very optimistic, and when I was thinking of how you like translate that to a film version, a more fleshed out character, I was thinking kind of, you know, maybe you have to go in the anime optimist direction, you know, kind of like, I guess, Deku or Zuko from My Hero Academia, if you watched that, Rex from Xenoblade 2, you know, that kind of character that's super upbeat, always, you know, very directly tells their friends everything's gonna be all right. And I was not seeing that in the trailer at all. So I was really worried they were just gonna completely mess up his character. And it's definitely not pulled straight from the games. But what they did is, to flesh him out, they made him determined, and that's how they portrayed his optimism, and it works really well. Mario is very set in his ways. He's more of the risk taker compared to Luigi, at least. And he's even like a little bit sassy in this movie. Like you get to see a little bit of Mario sass, like when he's dealing with enemies that he has to work with, like in Bowser's Fury, he has to help Bowser Jr. Free Bowser from the weird black goop that's making him so angry. And you know, he has his arms crossed. He's like, he doesn't want to work with Bowser Jr., but you know, he accepts that he has to. So you kind of get that sense of the sassy Mario, but you don't really get to see it. And here we actually get to see him stand his ground and say, you know, when he doesn't get the answer he wants, he'll say, "No, my brother is in trouble. You are going to help me." And I think it works for him. It's not something you would really expect from Game Mario, but it definitely makes sense for his character. And another thing we were all worried about was, you know, are they going to make him incompetent? Because we sort of saw that montage in the trailer of him, like, failing a bunch of obstacles. So it seemed like they were going to make him this incompetent doofus that, you know, couldn't get anything done. And I don't really feel like that's the case. With his plumbing business, he is shown to be very capable. Things go wrong, but it's because of external factors. It's not because Mario is bad at his job or anything, nor Luigi. And as for the you know, that montage we see in the trailer, I mean, it's Mario's first time in the Mushroom Kingdom. He's never, you know, had to do platforming like that before. I mean, Peach grew up there, so you know, she is used to that sort of platforming. That's why she is very that's why she's very competent at it. But then Mario, you know, he's coming here for the first time, and many have pointed out it's even reminiscent of learning games for the first time, learning Mario for the first time. Like, even for me, as someone who has played games for years and years now, pretty much my whole life, as early as I can remember, as early as I could basically really hold a D-pad, a Game Boy, I was just playing Metroid Prime for the first time, and I found I'm pretty bad at first-person platforming because I haven't done a lot of first-person games before. So when it comes to platforming, I keep missing jumps that I really shouldn't. And you know, that's the situation Mario's in here. It is his first time doing anything like this. You know, if you were to give a controller to an adult who'd never played Mario before, of course they're going to have difficulty. But then if you give a controller to someone who has played Mario before and ask them to complete the first level of a new Mario game, which is like the situation Peach is in, you know, they're gonna clear it right away. So yeah. And another thing I gotta say is Mario characters are static. They can't really go through character arcs. They can't change as people because you don't want to take away their core personality. But what they do here is very interesting because Mario does sort of go through a character arc, but he doesn't change as a person. And I can't really say more than that without getting into spoilers, I feel. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how they make him change without actually having his actions be different. So yeah, I mean, Mario in this movie is not necessarily Game Mario, but he keeps the core optimism of Game Mario, while also feeling, you know, a bit more grounded for a more fleshed out film version of the character. So for Luigi, first of all, Charlie Day isn't doing a Luigi voice, he's just doing his own voice, but it is a voice that is very perfect for Luigi. Other than the voice though, I would not say this is a different interpretation. This is Luigi pulled straight out of the games. He is, you know, wimpy, he's afraid of ghosts and all of that, but deep down he actually is brave. He needs a push to help him, you know, to help bring that out of him. In this movie, he sort of swaps roles with what we're used to with Peach, where he's the one captured. And the downside, of course, is we get to see less Luigi and we get to see less Mario and Luigi together. The upside is more Peach, and we get to see when Mario and Luigi are together, it is that much more special. Yeah, his dynamic with Mario was something I was really worried about in this going into this movie, because there is such a massive misunderstanding of their relationship that is garnered over the years. Like, because of one cutscene where Mario steps on Luigi's toes in Mario Tennis, people are like, well, Mario is pushy and he's mean to Luigi. Mario sees Luigi as a hindrance, and Luigi always feels like he's stuck in Mario's shadow. He's jealous of Mario. That is not at all their dynamic whatsoever, but it's sort of become a widespread rumor that it is. And thankfully they don't go in this route. I was worried that like they might have that arbitrary fight and then have to come back together. And that doesn't happen either. I was worried that Luigi would need to learn to be brave, which Luigi doesn't need to learn to be brave because Luigi is brave deep down. It's just he will protect the people he cares about out of his own volition. It's just he doesn't like to interact with any villains or anything like that when there are no stakes. But when there are, he doesn't need a push to become brave. You know, he will choose to face his fears for Mario, for those that he cares about. And thank God they got all of that right. They didn't make Luigi jealous of Mario. They didn't make Mario see Luigi as a hindrance. They have a very respectful, wholesome relationship in this movie as they do in the games, and that makes me so happy. It's not like the main plot. It's not the main focus of the film. We don't really get to see them together that often, but man, when they are together, it is, I would probably say, like, my favorite parts of the movie are when Mario and Luigi are by each other's side. I actually really enjoy the stuff in Brooklyn before they even got to the Mushroom Kingdom, just because their dynamic was that perfect. Before I get to our last main hero character, I want to talk about Bowser, because Bowser is an interesting case. He is not strictly pulled straight from the games, but he's not necessarily just Jack Black's interpretation either. He feels like a mix of both. To some extent, he feels very faithful to who he is in the games, but to other extents, Jack Black is definitely sort of doing his own spin on the character. Even in his voice, it's like sometimes Jack Black is definitely lowering his pitch a bit compared to his normal voice, but other times he basically sounds exactly like Jack Black through Bowser. But overall, I think Jack Black was a very good choice for Bowser. I didn't really show this in my initial reaction, but like, I was kind of put off by that whole thing when they first revealed his voice cast during that one Nintendo Direct. But I think that, like, deep down, I didn't want to say it, but Jack Black was the one pick I was like, I actually think that works, even from the beginning. And to me, it absolutely does. Bowser is both a very threatening foe. He is, of course, the villain of Mario. However, he is also a total goofball, and you know, he's sort of got a soft side he doesn't like showing, or he likes acting. He is super tough, and he likes acting super tough, but he is also like a very good father and all of that. I do have one little complaint about him, which is I felt like he was a bit too mean to his minions, funnily enough. In the games, like specifically like the RPG games and the Paper Mario games, as you talk to Bowser's minions, you actually realize that they like working for Bowser. It isn't like they're like forced to work under his command or anything. Like, they genuinely enjoy having him as a boss and being part of his army. And so in this movie, he is a little bit meaner to his minions than I would have liked. I do think there is a reason for that. I think I understand why. But yeah, it isn't like he goes too far in any case. He's still there's still more respect than I would say you might expect if you don't know his relationship from the games. But yeah, that is one thing I wish was changed a bit about Bowser. And there is one other thing I want to say about him that I'll have to get to during the vague spoilers section. And Kamek is one character that basically has 0 speaking lines in the game, so they had to make a new voice for him, and his voice works. He is, I would say, an interpretation, I suppose, because like Donkey Kong, there's like not really much to pull from. But I will just say real quick, Kamek, I don't think he quite gets the recognition he deserves out of this movie. A lot of people kind of pass over him. But Bowser, for a lot of this movie, he needed a hype man. He needed someone to play off of. And Kamek just fulfills that role perfectly. He is basically just there to elevate Jack Black's performance, but he does that very well. So I think Kamek just deserves a little bit more credit for his role in this film. So I wanted to cover Peach last because I think she is the most divorced from her game counterpart. Peach in the games she is sort of like hyper feminine. I mean, anytime I say words like feminine or masculine or anything, you can kind of imagine it in massive air quotes. I don't really like the whole even concept of like, well, this is what men act like, this is what, this is what women act like. I don't like that in general, but, when I say those words, you can imagine I mean like how society typically deems feminine and masculine, etc. But anyway, yeah, Peach is like very hyper feminine in the games. And as time goes on, they've also sort of focused more on her leadership role, on her as a princess, and we get to see her take a more active role. Of course, you have the spin-offs and sports games and stuff where she's a playable character alongside everyone else, and I think the best example is 3D World, where Bowser is the main antagonist, but she is not captured in that game. She is fighting Bowser right alongside Mario. You can play the entire game just as Peach. So in this movie, of course, they don't necessarily want to just focus on like the whole kind of stereotypical female aspect of her character. They want to focus on that aspect, of course. So what we get is a Peach that is not from the Mushroom Kingdom but was raised there, and she is more experienced with the world and how things work in this kingdom. So she sort of takes on a mentor relationship to Mario, where she is introducing him to this weird magical world. And she's not just captured in this movie like she is in many games. She is right there alongside Mario. And it's not her sending out Toads to do her work. She is the one that is actually going out herself to try and build up an army to stop Bowser. And as someone who much prefers Peach in a more active role, I am very happy with this. I love that Peach is not just in a occasional movie. I love that she gets to be right alongside the rest of the cast. That being said, I do feel like Peach in this movie feels more like Daisy. I hope you don't mind some cat purring at ASMR because my cat just crawled on top of me. But anyway, before I continue, I just want to say, like everything else I've mentioned so far, all of my other negatives, this is a nitpick. This is not me saying, like, they ruined Peach in the movie or anything like that. I still really love this interpretation of Peach, but I think I made it pretty obvious I was kind of going into this as a Mario traditionalist who wants these characters to be as close to their game selves as possible. And Peach is the one that I would say is the farthest from that, because like I said, I think she acts more like Daisy than Peach. And when thinking about how to make her act more like Peach, the thing I thought of is like, keep everything about her in this movie the same. Don't change anything about what they have, but then just add like a little scene where we get to see the more, I suppose, elegant princess side of her, where, maybe she's sipping tea on the balcony, then a paratrooper sneaks up behind her and she quickly whips around, picks up her chair, smacks him to the ground, and then goes back to sipping tea. Or she's racing back to warn the Toads that Bowser is coming, but then she quickly stops, pulls out a comb, makes sure her hair looks nice, and then continues. And I understand why they avoided this, as they don't want to push the idea that women have to be girly in that way. But as I said, I think Game Peach, modern Game Peach, does represent that of being a strong leader, but also acting like super feminine. And I think when you take a character with both of those qualities and you remove the feminine aspect to make her seem like a stronger leader, it might accidentally push the idea that though that femininity and power leadership are opposed to one another. Whereas I think Game Peach shows off that they're not, that those two qualities can coexist within the same person. And again, if you still want a character that is a female that's a leader but doesn't act girly, well, that's Daisy. I mean, I think Peach is written here like Daisy should be. So I think it was smart not to include Daisy in this movie and to save her for a future one. But I think that is something that they could do in the sequel to make Peach feel more like herself, and to include Daisy. Is just write Daisy like Peach was written here, but then write Peach very similar to how she was written here, and just, like I said, add a little scene that shows off her more elegant princessy side, right? And that way you sort of have both sides of the fence covered. You have two female characters that are in leadership positions, one of which still acts very feminine, the other of which does not act super feminine at all. Is just a complete tomboy. And so yeah, I think when it comes to Peach, I just feel like they could have kept her a bit closer to her character without it necessarily going against what they have going for her in this movie. Okay, and now I am going to move into vague spoilers. Again, I won't say anything specific about like how things play out, but I will kind of, hint at some vague plot points. And the first thing is, I mentioned I sort of had another little thing about Bowser that I was a bit disappointed by, and that is that Bowser actually barely interacts with the main heroes. And that, I think, is why he is sort of meaner to the enemies than we expect, because he spends most of the movie in his own castle, not interacting with the good guys, but they want to remind us that he's evil and show off his ferocity, so he has to be a bit crueler to his minions than we would expect. And that's also why Kamek is his hype man, why Kamek takes a more prevalent role, is because he needs someone to bounce off of when he is by himself in his castle, right? So yeah, there's that. But I also want to say, to do with Bowser's Castle, this isn't really a spoiler at all, but there is a character that is in the jail with Luigi, and he was shown off in the trailers and all, but every line he had, it feels very un-Mario, but he was hilarious. We all loved that character. We were all cackling at like all of their lines, so yeah, that character, definitely a big thumbs up from us. I will also say they definitely showed off too much in the trailers, showed off more than I would have liked. Like, there will still be lots of little Easter eggs and stuff that they didn't necessarily show that you have to really keep your eyes peeled for. But when it comes to, like really cool little extra things you wouldn't have expected, most of it was given away. But there is one thing. There is one scene that was not shown in any trailers, not really hinted at, that I absolutely did not expect. That was a total surprise, and I absolutely loved it. There's a scene where Bowser is trying to do something and Mario stops him, and at that point I kind of thought, okay, that is the climax, that is the end. The rest of this is just going to be a little wrap-up showing the bros getting accustomed to the Mushroom Kingdom and all. But then it kept going for like an extra maybe just 5 to 10 minutes, but it did something I absolutely was not expecting in those 5 to 10 minutes. And that was my favorite scene in the entire movie. Just because it was a really cool surprise I would not have seen coming. And it was just handled really well. It was so fun. Yeah, that scene really caught me off guard, and I am very happy they did not show at least that scene in the trailers. And even though much of this movie was given away or was very predictable, it does not ruin this movie to me, because even when you know what's going to happen, in a Mario game, basically what's going to happen story-wise, and at least the mainline ones, but then the adventure is still very fun, and that is exactly this movie. I knew exactly where it was going at almost every turn. I predicted from the first trailer how Mario would defeat Bowser in this. But that being said, just the way it's played off, the way they do it, hearing the score when it happens, it's so great. Even though it's coming from a mile away, it is still so much fun to see how they actually execute it. So, despite the predictability of this movie, it's still very fun, even when you know exactly what's going to happen. If there's one thing like one major complaint I have, not just like a little nitpick about like individual characters or anything like that. One thing I actually kind of had against the movie as a whole, it's just I genuinely wanted to see more. And that should be taken as a good sign, is that, you know, I went in, or we were kind of expecting this was going to be a train wreck from the moment we heard Illumination was doing it. The voice cast did not raise, it raised a lot of red flags, it seemed. And then the trailers, they made it seem like it was going to be a lot better. But, you know, there was still that worry of, is it actually going to be? And I ended up wanting to see more. I want them to make a sequel. I want to see a Donkey Kong spinoff. And while I don't think Illumination should be it, I don't think Illumination should be it for like every franchise. I do want to see Nintendo make more movies now for other franchises. So yeah, I mean, I did not know how they could make a Mario movie work. Now there's genuinely so much they didn't touch on. I could see how they could do plenty more movies. I could see a whole trilogy or more in the future. Given the massive amounts of money this movie is making, I have a feeling we are absolutely going to see a sequel. There was, I won't tell you what it was, but there was a post-credit scene showing they definitely have ideas for a sequel. They want to do one. And I think there's a lot of places they could go. As I mentioned Daisy a bit earlier, and I would really like to see Daisy, especially for her relationship with Luigi. We never get to see her relationship with Luigi in game. The most we have is like a Mario Kart track where there's a statue of her dancing with him, but then we never get to see the two of them interact really. And I think that dynamic of having one like super timid, shy character shipped with a character that is like really outgoing and adventurous, I think that is a wonderful relationship dynamic I would love to see in the future. I would love to see Peach's backstory explore more. I'd love to see more with that and, you know, where she comes from. I obviously want to see stuff from like Galaxy. Rosalina makes no appearance whatsoever in this movie. She is not in the post-credit scene. That's not a spoiler because it's something that's not in the movie. And you know, Rosalina is maybe my favorite Mario character. I would love to see her. If I could like kind of just detail out a vague plan of what I would like to see, I think Mario Movie 2, Bowser is back. Maybe this is where we see like Giga Bowser, you know, Bowser sort of, he goes from like, maybe what is it, like 7 feet, 10 feet-ish to just absolutely massive, like the size of a skyscraper. I think maybe Mario Movie 2 we get to see Skyscraper Bowser, and he's the main antagonist, you know, but then he gets to have more more like prevalent minions, like the Koopalings or Bowser Jr. or somebody. And then Mario Movie 3, I think that's where we maybe even get to see Mario and Bowser fight alongside each other, like a bigger threat appears, and they actually have to work with each other. I think that would be such a fun dynamic in movie form. It's really fun when it happens in the games, when Mario and Bowser have to work with each other. And I think it would be really, really fun to see Chris Pratt Mario and Jack Black Bowser having to work together to fight for a common goal. That would be, you know, I don't want that in movie number 2. I want to see Bowser fight Mario more. I want their rivalry to develop more. But I think in the third movie, that would be really, really fun. And they could go beyond that, I'm sure. There's so much they could cover. This is such a big series with so many games. They could go in so many directions. But I want to be there for all of them. I want this to be a series and not just a singular movie. And the fact that I am saying that after, you know, so much worry and doubt is almost miraculous. To wrap up, I know that critics have been, in my opinion, a bit unfairly bashing this movie. And I saw one out of touch critic say that this movie has all the fun of an unplugged Game Boy. And obviously that's a very bad analogy because they're using it to try and bash the movie, but a Game Boy unplugged is a portable system. It runs perfectly unplugged. So I would say actually, as someone who understands a Game Boy, I agree with them. I think this movie does have all the fun of an unplugged Game Boy, though I would add an unplugged Game Boy Advance SP, because that is the system on which I played my first true console video game Super Mario World.